in brand new remastered Technicolor.
Hello and welcome to Two Queers,
One Pod.
I'm Bridie.
I'm Imogen.
And today we are talking about
Winter brains.
winter sads, winter brains, mental health around the latter part of the year and the first part of the next one. Winter.
In the Northern Hemisphere.
Yes, very, very true. True.
This isn't necessarily one for our Australian listeners. No. Of which I'm sure there are many.
Yeah, tune in about 6 months and then this will be relevant.
Yeah, cue this up for 6 months' time. Come back when you need it. We're recording this the day after World Mental Health Awareness Day.
Yes.
So it feels very prescient.
It does. And also I had my first kind of, I would say like weather changing related blip earlier in the week. So I'm feeling very prepped and primed for this chat. You know, we had it in the book for like a couple of weeks now, but then I was like, oh, I actually feel crap. So this will be great for the podcast.
This will be good content.
Yeah, I guess we're just going to kind of freely chat about our history with our mental health, especially in this time of year, what kind of triggers it and how we try and deal with it as best we can. And then I think we're going to lead into something a bit more like fun towards the end of the episode, but this might be a bit kind of like, duh. But the idea is not to sort of be like, just to drag everyone down in listening to this. I think that with talking openly about mental health and struggling, you know, there's a lot you can, hopefully people can get something from that isn't just like, well, I feel crap now, thank you. But like, I think it's better to just kind of discuss it. And, it, you know, there's a lot of, stigma around it, especially being open. And I think when we were growing up, especially, there was not as much kind of being allowed to talk about it openly in a way that was received well. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and also hopefully we'll be able to chuck in some things that we find helpful.
Yeah.
And I think the more information there is out there, then the more people have the options to pick and choose what works for them.
Exactly.
And I know that like there can be big old lists of things that you should try if you're feeling in a bad place, and sometimes none of those things work on the list. And that can feel pretty bleak.
And sometimes you don't even want to find the list. You're just like, I don't have the time or the energy to even lift my head today, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. So what would you say your like warning signs are for knowing that you need to start making some changes?
I would say, so it's difficult with me because my kind of memory retention only goes back so far to sort of discuss this. And I don't know if that's just because up until I was sort of like 16, I didn't really do a lot. So there hasn't been much of a need to remember like the day-to-day being at home kind of thing. Like I obviously remember like family holidays and bits like that, but I don't really remember how I was generally. Like it's just, I can't find it in my brain. But I remember kind of when I was 16, I just moved to school for sixth form sort of college years. And I remember there was like it was either really late at night or really early in the morning. I just felt so awful. And I went next door to my parents' house and was like, parents' room, and was like, I need to go to the doctor. Like I need to go, and I just really don't feel great. And I didn't know like what it was, but it felt quite physical, but it was like it wasn't like I had a tummy bug, or it wasn't like I hurt my leg or what have you. And I remember I went to the doctor and I sat down with like a male doctor, I think, doctor or nurse, I'm pretty sure they're a doctor. I'm not entirely sure.
So your GP?
It wasn't my GP. I didn't know this person. But I kind of had put in like I think my mum had phoned up for me and said that I needed to go speak to someone because I was having like low moods or what have you. And I remember that I can't remember what I said to this person. I don't think I told them everything because I was very nervous. I'd never done anything like it before. I didn't tell them the full extent of my kind of problems internally.
Well, you wouldn't.
But no, of course not. And then I remember like vividly them just kind of turning around and going like having like this my sort of thing in front of them and going, well, you know, you're 16, you're female, and honestly just basically chalked it up to hormones. And that was so. And I remember then having to go to college afterwards because it was a morning appointment, and just kind of going to the common room area. And it was like the same place, same people, but I felt really different. I felt like I was looking at the same things and they didn't seem the same. And it all just felt kind of like the room was spinning, and like it was like I had this, not secret, but I had this thing about myself that I couldn't articulate. The doctor couldn't articulate, and at the time I thought that was like, you know, what he said is obviously what goes. So that was me. It's just, you know, I can't do anything about this. And I just remember feeling so awful. But because I was doing mock exams at that time, I just kind of got like pushed it aside and was like, well, that's what the doctor said. It's just hormones. So I guess I'll just wait till I'm 20. And then in obviously subsequent years, it was kind of in this time of year especially, I just like sunk. And my kind of warning signs for that then, after having obviously years of learning them, are that I get very like, I feel like a lot of physical fatigue. Like my body just is so tired. And I either don't sleep enough or I sleep too much. I've never really been great at sleeping anyway, for as long as I can remember, but it's very like, it's just like a lot of tiredness and a lot of just wanting to be like in bed, dark room, kind of, even if I'm sleeping or not, just in that kind of safe zone, I suppose. I get like more messy than usual. I don't take care of my like personal hygiene as much. I don't eat particularly well. So it's all those kind of like self-maintenance things that I just don't keep up with. And I think I have got to the point now where I realise because of these warning signs, I kind of go, right, I feel like a bad time is looming. But now I've got to the stage where I just let it, you know, because in previous years I've kind of gone, I feel like crap, I can't do anything about it. And then really took it out on myself. Like, why are you like this? Like, there's got to be your fault because it's your body, it's your brain. And I've really tried, and it's not been easy, but I've really tried to kind of rehash the way that I speak to myself, and just kind of like talk myself through things and be like, well, you feel like this because of maybe this, this and this. Like, these are the things you could do, but if you don't, then it's okay. Like, just kind of take it easy a bit more. But that's
just
kind
be
of
kind with yourself and gentle. Kind of talk to yourself the way that you would a friend that was going through a similar time.
Yeah, and I don't think I would have got to that point where I can do that had it not been for like meeting people like you and our friend Lana, and like doing my own research and being involved and surrounding my kind of like who I follow on social media with the kind of like not overly positive thinking, but just practical thinking. I think that has definitely helped me, because I think a portion of the like really heavy feeling comes from me feeling it and then just being really like angry at myself, and it just doesn't help, basically.
Yeah, I think what I find helpful with that sort of stuff in particular, like the physical side of things, is to almost go back to what feel to me like biological first principles of like the idea that you are still a mammal and that you kind of are a bear in a cave kind of thing. And as the nights close in and like days get shorter and things get darker and colder, it makes sense to want to conserve your energy and to want to eat more kind of comforting foods and be warmer and stay inside and sleep more. And to me, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And so to really give yourself a hard time about it is completely futile, because it's how biologically you are kind of wired. And some people sure can override it, and that's really great for them, but some people can't. And you know, whether it's diagnosed as seasonal depression or not, I think most people will feel it to some degree. And I know that I first started noticing it more in the spring, of the fact that I can feel myself as the days get longer and it gets warmer and sunnier, I can feel my energy levels increase almost palpably. Yeah. And so I've always, when I've had really difficult periods of like low mood and things in the autumn or the winter, I've often chalked them up to actual stuff that's happened.
Yeah.
So the past couple of years, I've had tricky things happen in like September or August for a good few years now. And so I've been like, oh, well, it makes sense that I would be feeling a bit shit.
Yeah.
But then realizing the seasonal component to it has been really helpful because I can be confident that it will pass.
Yeah.
And so I can remember how I feel come like March or April.
Because it is almost like an exact opposite, isn't it? You see the sun stay around until like sort of 6 rather than set at 4, and you're like, oh my god, here we go, like strap in.
You see things blooming, you see trees kind of come to life and stuff, and I can feel it tangibly having an impact on my energy levels and my mood and stuff. And I just have to, what I've done over the past few years is that I've journaled quite extensively for those months, because usually that's the kind of thing that I would let slide the moment I start to feel a bit better. But now I have these written records down to like stuff as cutesy as like pressed flowers and stuff of it will pass.
Yeah.
Spring happens, and the fact that we're so distance from that now in our like modern age of technology and stuff, like the seasons don't really have that big of an impact on our lives, but we are still mammals and we are influenced by the weather and stuff like that. And I think going back to those first principles is really helpful, because you end up going back to kind of the primitive ideas of the sun will come back. We know that the sun will come back
for sure, and it allows you to kind of just be a bit more gentle with yourself based on, it's not you necessarily, it's kind of, and it's kind of, and it, I think knowing that it is a seasonal thing rather than just being like, why is it, because I used to be every sort of like Christmas and New Year time, I used to kind of blame it on that, and on the sense that it's very like, you have to see loads of family in consecutive days, and it just tires me out so much. And I kind of thought that it was like,
it's a really high pressure situation, particularly since we've both worked in retail for a long time as well.
Definitely.
Like,
that
it's
aside,
exhausting.
it gets, and everything just ramps up, and it's that expectation to be like, well, it's Christmas, so obviously things are going to just be crazy.
Yeah, and it starts earlier and earlier. It kind of starts from September, so you're expected to be really, really busy and exhausted, but also it's Christmas, hooray!
Yeah,
and then
but then it gets to Christmas, and then you're just like, oh, is that it? Like,
and then January, February,
and,
really, really hard.
And then after that, it's just like, then there's nothing. Then it is just waiting for, the sun to come up, because January and February are generally quite miserable.
I found having houseplants really helpful for this, because they have a literal growing season and a kind of a dormant season. So spring and summer, you can kind of expect them to be growing new little bits, and you feed them more and you do more. But then in the winter, you just need to make sure that they're okay. You're not expecting anything of them.
Yeah.
You're not expecting them to have flowers and stuff.
Yeah.
You just need to make sure that they're warm enough, and they've got enough food and all of that kind of stuff, but you're not expecting anything miraculous from them. And oddly, that has helped with my attitude towards myself. Of like, I don't really expect that much from myself in sort of from like October through to March. I don't really, wait, is that 6 months? October, November. October through to March. That's a fair assessment of like, I don't hold myself up to too higher expectations through those months.
Yeah, and I think that's really good, and I think I'm learning to do that more, definitely since I've kind of moved out from my family home as well, because it's kind of and there's pros and cons to this, because because I moved out 2 years ago and went to live by myself, and I was also going through like a tricky breakup at the time as well, so having to navigate all of that and this kind of just feeling like crap all the time, it was hard. But there was a little bit of me that was relieved that I was just on my own, and there wasn't like, obviously my parents would have like cared if I'm struggling, but I found it a lot harder when I was living with them to kind of just because they had the kind of like, well, we'll get you up, get up and you start the day right and all this kind of stuff, and it's with the best of intentions, but
they just deal with things differently to the way you do. They're very busy people.
Yeah, and it's it is better, I think, for me to kind of treat these, if I'm not at work, because I guess I'm like objectively busy. I work a full-time job in the week, but a lot of my downtime is just kind of being very, very still, and that's just what suits me. But there isn't that kind of like, I guess, judgment of being like, you're lazy, you sitting on your ass all day. Like, I don't have that kind of, I don't have that real voice. I still sometimes have that mental voice, but then my new mental voice is just kind of like, shut up, we're taking it easy.
But then you also have to be gentle with that voice, because that voice comes from, your parents, but also from the society that we live in, which doesn't stop October through to March. We do have to keep going to a certain extent. We just have to be kinder with ourselves for maybe not achieving as much as maybe we would like to during those months, because it's hard. It's it's so much harder to get out and do stuff and go to work when it's pissing it down with rain.
Yeah.
And we live in the UK. We live in a perpetually kind of grey and miserable country. So it is. What was that thing from GCSE English, like pathetic fallacy?
Yeah, I love that.
I just the UK understands seasonal depression.
Yeah.
It's kind of like we invented it.
Yeah.
Like the weather is very indicative of how you can end up feeling. And sure, like I said before, if you can push through it and if you don't feel impacted by it, then that's wonderful, like good for you. And if you can kind of keep yourself busy enough to ride it out, then that's wonderful.
To be honest though, I couldn't imagine not having a downtime part of the year. Like, that scares me.
Yeah, the idea of being on all the time sounds
could not,
exhausting.
Could not.
But some people can.
Yeah,
and
that's
like
fine.
I say, good for them. That's great. But like we're not amongst that population. We struggle, and it's not a great time.
It's not a great time. But sometimes though, when I am like, when I am just like kind of resting and I've like popped a nice like film or whatever on, part of me is like, how many times have you watched this film? And just got that kind of like guilt around spending time not doing. Do you know what I mean? But it is. I know that it's stupid, and I would never.
It's not stupid.
Sorry, it's needless. I would never kind of, belittle a friend or anything like that. For choosing to, and it is what I do a lot. Is just kind of like nestle in my bed and stuff. But it's hard to kind of switch off that thing of feeling like you should feel guilty about this. And it's less so like, it's more like when I feel guilty about it, I think, it's the whole like, you've got one life and you're using it, spending it watching. And it's just, that's what I get in. I get myself into little like tizzes about that sometimes.
But like, you don't get points when you die for like how many films you've watched or, any of those
hills you've climbed.
Yeah, you don't get extra points from it. Like the whole point of these things is that you do as much of these things as you enjoy, and that's got to be it, really. Like, you don't need to prove yourself to anyone by ticking off all the films on one of those big scratch off charts, or countries on a scratch off map. Certainly not in the year of 2020. Like you do what makes you happy, and like what. Oh.
And to be honest, I think this year, like, we kind of had like, well, obviously we had lockdown and everything where we couldn't go outside. It's kind of similar to this time of year, but like more, obviously way more different factors, but similar in the sense of like what I spent it doing.
Oh yeah, so many people were like, Shakespeare wrote such and such and blah during this. What's your excuse? And it's just like, well,
there was this hilarious TikTok that I saw of this girl that was like, we've got 3 months. We've time to learn language and do this and do that. And she honestly, and then she just like threw her phone on the floor and was just punching it. And I was literally like, that is honestly me. Like, it's just like, everyone just needs to be quiet.
But that's been my experience because I've been off work now for almost 4 years. Christ. Like, I've been signed off with being ill, poorly, sick, disabled, whatever. And so many people in previous years have talked about how they wish they had as much free time as I have, and they, kind of like, oh, wouldn't it be lovely to spend all day in bed? And it's like, granted, I see your point. I acknowledge that you would enjoy that because of your life. And if you had some time off, then that would be a holiday. I also acknowledge my privilege with having access to a roof over my head and food in the fridge and stuff because of my amazing mother. It's still not a fucking holiday.
Yeah.
Because of the way our society works, if I had a job, I would be infinitely better off in my mental well-being because I would actually have a sense of self-worth because of the amount of actual pound signs we put on people, as in the amount they produce, their productivity.
Yeah.
So people are always looking to be more productive, and that is, it has a financial label on it. And that would be, if I was able to be more productive, then I would have more easy access to a higher self-worth, whereas any self-worth that I have now has to come despite of the fact I am not productive. I don't contribute to the economy. Well, no, I contribute to the economy with stress spending, but I don't produce anything. I produce a small amount of art that I sell on my Etsy shop and on Depop and whatnot. I produce an empathetic ear to my friends.
For which we are very grateful.
I produce the occasional washing up or grocery shopping for my family, and that is it. And so it's really hard for these periods of, so like lockdown, like winter, when people feel that pinch that I've had for years now, and that many disabled people have had to a much greater extent or for a longer period of time, is that you have to find who you are outside of your productivity and what you bring to the table. And you have to see your inherent worth as a human being. And like I said about the keeping a house plant, it's similar with pets, of we don't expect, if you have a pet in your home, you don't expect them to be making rent. You feed them, you let them sleep, you play with them, but generally you kind of let them do what they want, particularly with cats. With dogs, you take them for a walk, you take them on an adventure or whatever, and you just kind of have to, they give as much as they want to. They'll come and give you some fusses, maybe some kind of emotional bond, that kind of thing. But generally speaking, you believe that they have inherent value as a being without them contributing in any meaningful way. And so I view myself as my family's cat.
I love that.
I'll go and do pets. I'll cook sometimes or do some washing up and stuff. But generally, I just have to see myself as a house cat. And that has genuinely helped me with my sense of self-worth. It doesn't hold up under much scrutiny, I will admit. But on my good days, I can see myself as a house cat. And I recommend everyone
treat
themselves the way that they would treat a pet. Not just talk to yourself the way that you talk to a pet or a friend, but consider yourself as having just inherent worth that you were born with, rather than what you produce or contribute being your sole reason for being on the planet.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting when you were saying about kind of productivity, all that kind of stuff. I often think about how I think the only reason that I do keep ticking along is the fact that I have a job. I can't remember. I don't think I said this. I think we were just talking about it as friends last week. I don't think I mentioned it in the episode, but it's lockdown gave me kind of a predictable but scary insight into, if you take away my job, I realize it's difficult. I don't feel, and obviously it was taking away my job in scary circumstances. And I had some sort of, I was by myself just after a big family bereavement and all this kind of stuff. So it was a lot to manage. And because I was so used to it, because I've been in that job for just over 3 years at that point, I was just used to a lot of my time being spoken for. So to have all of that extra time, I was like, fuck. I think I drew maybe 3 things. My productivity just went absolutely down, but it kind of forced me to go, look, we don't know how long this is going to go on for. If you just beat yourself up mentally every single day, then you're not going to come out of it particularly well. So you need to just try, this is me talking to myself, you need to try your hardest to just kind of take a day at a time, take a thing at a time, you know, like, okay, I'm going to shower and then I'll decide what I'm doing after that then. But yeah, like my kind of zappy kind of drive, like, you know, bam, 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 work, then home, and then la, la, la. It just went, like, I just was like, I have no concept of time. I don't have a sleep schedule. I'm not doing anything. I'm just kind of like, but it was what made me feel safe and like comfortable in such a weird, like never unprecedented time. And I think that obviously it still is a horrible thing, but the personal lessons that I took out of that time was that, like, you know, you can take this into when you have other periods where you feel bad, is that like you just need to just
But you absolutely weren't alone in that. You know, that was a huge, and I don't mean that in the sense to belittle you, I mean that in the sense of to validate that so many people experience that, like people that haven't had a period of not working for like longer than 2 weeks in, you know, since they were 16 or something. You know, so many people were in that boat, and so many people were kind of having to have those realizations, or were going into complete denial about it. And that's sort of how we've ended up with the tricky political and social situation that we're in now, is that people just couldn't handle that level of unstructured time. And certainly not that level of unstructured time by themselves. And we don't live in a society that particularly encourages an awful lot of independent time for reflection and stuff, because the more we think, the more we have time to realise that shit's fucked up. And I don't think that it's a coincidence that some of the big social movements that have happened this year have happened in such close proximity to lockdown, and people having
the time
more
to
time
consider,
to take a step back and stop being in that super like high paced thing of, you know, work, sleep, eat, look after your kids, look after, and that constant kind of rat race type mentality. And people had a minute to go, wait, why? And I don't think it's too strong a word to say that it has radicalized a whole bunch more people than ever would have had the access to that kind of brain space before, because it has messed a whole load of people up. And then some people have been really excited to like go back to the way things were, and then a whole other lot of people have been going, oh, but I don't think the way things were was actually working for me. I don't think that's necessarily something that we should be striving towards. I think it will be really interesting to see how things go in regards to these adjustments that were made, which are kind of bittersweet, because it's wonderful that more people have been able to work from home and more people have had access to things remotely, like telemedicine and stuff like that. But these are things that disabled people have been asking for and fighting for such a long time. And we've been told that it's, you know, we're being too difficult. No one really asks for it. We don't have the technology. It's too expensive. You know, oh, you're such a minority. We don't need to do that because we don't have the demand. And as soon as able-bodied people needed it, and as soon as it was having a real impact on kind of the bottom line of the country, suddenly these things just happened overnight. And it's great. Honestly, truly it is great. But thinking back on periods of my life where I've been, and I'm saying this as like an able-bodied person, all of my like disability and stuff, it's all in my head. But like I don't have to use a wheelchair or any kind of mobility aid or anything like that. And to see all this, but then going back through my own life and realizing the things that I could have done or achieved so much more easily had I not had to fight for these things. And then just to see them kind of going like, oh, well, obviously we'll do this thing. And then just like the entire disabled community goes, well, fuck me then. But like it's great that we have access to these things now, and I just hope that they don't get taken away.
That would be nice. No, that is crap. And especially for you, I know we've had conversations about this before, where you know, how people were saying to you, no, basically over lockdown when you were just realizing like, you just wanted to sort of scream out, this has been my life, you know, for such a long time. And I can imagine that being really, really frustrating. Do you feel like that comes, obviously lockdown aside, have you ever experienced that kind of thing where it's like, welcome to my life, like sort of year round, when people say that they start to feel not in the kind of way like you don't deserve, like you can't feel that way, but
yeah, there's certainly no kind of like schadenfreude. I don't take any joy in it. But sometimes I have had the experiences with people in my life because I've been dealing with mental health difficulties for, well, like 14, 15 years now. When people in my life have been not particularly empathetic to things, and then some years later have come back to me as some kind of oracle of mental health wisdom because they've needed help with something, because they've needed help either navigating the mental health system or just generally kind of they need someone to be like, yeah, it fucking sucks, doesn't it? There has been part of me that hasn't been the most gracious, I suppose, about it. Never outwardly, because no one needs that, but that sense of, you get it now, don't you? Like people who have brushed off my difficulties and things, but then they've been like, well, actually, I think maybe I've been depressed for X amount of time. And I'm just like, yeah, it's fun, isn't it? Yeah, cool. What do you expect me to do about it? Like, that sucks, but like, I'm not a doctor. You know, I'm not a therapist. I'm not trained. You're not paying me, quite frankly, you know, to be an empathetic ear. And so that's happened a couple of times over my life, but this has been the biggest instance of people maybe reassessing how they think about people's positions in society and kind of maybe their own internalized ableism, and about sort of how, like, you get a lot of stuff about sort of people being lazy or unmotivated and stuff like that. And now that people have experienced this extended period of unstructured time, and I'm saying this, obviously, these are the people that aren't like essential workers. Like, people were still working in shops, people were still doing medical things, the essential key workers and stuff. Like, they haven't had this period of unstructured time. They've been working full throttle all year, and fucking hats off to them. But like, all of these other people but also those weren't ever the people that would say, oh, wouldn't it be lovely to have a life like yours? Yeah. Because those people aren't that far away from where I am on kind of the social hierarchy, because these are also people that are shat on from a great height so much of the time, like people in customer-facing retail roles and nurses and
just
stuff
so
like
backwards,
that.
isn't it?
But then the people that are sort of like higher up the food chain are the people that really, really can't deal with the unstructured time. Yeah. And they're like, oh, it's not just a 4-month holiday. I ran out of books after week 1. I want to go to the pub. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, it sucks, doesn't it?
So we kind of went on a bit of a coronavirus segue there. But I think that was it,
2020 in a nutshell, bit of a coronavirus segue.
Literally. And just going back to the thing when you were saying, like, when a lot of people who are feeling depressed kind of misconstrue that as them being about themselves, or that being lazy. Like, I definitely have experienced that because and it's tricky because obviously I was there when I was younger, but I don't really have a reliable like memory recall of it, and I don't know if I was like depressed as a child. I have no way of knowing, because it's just, you know, just what it is. But a lot of what I would attribute now as like depressive traits were kind of chalked up to laziness when I was a child. So now that I'm an adult and I kind of navigate my own way through, because I've obviously moved out and that kind of thing. Like sometimes I do tell myself that I'm lazy because my hygiene's not great, my room's a mess, because I'm used to someone saying that to me. But it is just about learning, like, you know, it's not I mean, maybe I am a tiny bit lazy. Like, okay, that's fine. But it's, you don't, and because calling yourself lazy negates the fact that you are potentially a bit, mentally unwell. And there's no way to kind of, you're just not being nice to yourself, basically.
But also, just like calling someone lazy has never helped anyone. It's like telling someone to calm down. Like, when has that ever worked?
Yeah.
So it's kind of a pointless word. I think I'd use it when it comes to like people that aren't putting effort into like, so for instance, in our personal lives, we've recently experienced what I would refer to as a lazy apology. So someone where it's, it's just a bit subpar. You'd want a little bit more from it. That's the only time when I would really use the word lazy. I wouldn't describe it as like a character trait from someone, because I think generally you can have a lack of ambition, which I don't think is a negative thing. You can have a lack of motivation, which I think is often a mental health thing.
I wonder if it could also be kind of, similarly to what you were just talking about with that apology, is kind of like missing steps, but still getting to a point. Like, that isn't what my apparent laziness is. Like, if I don't get to a point where everything's perfect. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if that makes sense. It made sense in my head when I was like kind of putting it together. But
I think there's cutting corners is a type of laziness.
But then by cutting corners, that implies that you then get to a place, and I'm 23 and I've yet to get to a place where like I'm consistently all around feeling like I've got it, if that makes sense.
I don't think anyone ever does feel that, though. I think that anyone that gives that impression, that's all it is.
You're liars.
Well, no, I don't think necessarily that they're lying. I think it's that they on the inside probably feel like they don't have it all together, but they're just good at putting on a facade. Like we talked about this the other week, that I think outwardly people often think that I have my shit together, which is just such a joke. Like the idea that I look relatively put together on the outside, and people go, oh yeah, she seems fine. And then anyone that gets to know me knows that I'm an absolute bin fire of a human being.
No.
Sorry.
That's too far.
Okay, too much. But you take my point. It was like I was going to say trash can fire, and then I was like, that's very American. Bin fire.
But bin fire is just such a like graphic. Oh, anyway, but that is not what you are. But that did make me laugh. I don't feel like, so yeah, to sum up, we haven't got our shit together.
Treat yourself like a friend, treat yourself like a houseplant, treat yourself like a pet. Generally, if you would do it for a pet, do it for yourself. Yeah. That includes feeding and bathing and making sure you've got fresh water, and just things that make you feel sleep.
Comfortable, like things that just make you kind of relax as much as you can, and just kind of...
And just remember, like kind of with a lot of these things, in no way to negate how bad you feel, but generally life just isn't that deep.
Yeah.
And so the world will keep turning for better or for worse if you take a break.
Yeah.
And that's
something that I say to myself, and for like the last year or so, is just like, it might feel really, really heavy on you, but just try and get some perspective on it, and just go, and then not to minimize your sort of issues.
Yeah, it's definitely walking a line, because there are so many people that be like kind of, there are so many people that have it worse. And it's like, that's not really helpful, because there are also so many people that have it better. It doesn't...
Yeah, it's like, oh, thank you.
Yeah, it doesn't really help anything. But I think just holding things lightly is what my therapist refers to it as. Of just...
petal.
Yeah, like kind of taking it seriously, but not dwelling on it too much. And if the way you feel won't last forever, whether that be a good feeling or a bad feeling, everything is...
Life is a highway.
Everything's fluid, and this too shall pass, and all of that kind of stuff. And I think that they sound really naff and a bit bumper stickery, but it's...
Oh, I need those bumper stickers in my life, like in my brain sometimes, because I don't care if it's naff. If it helps, if it helps me or if it helps anyone else, then it's all right.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of these things are cliches for a reason. Some of them are bollocks, obviously, but we all have our own brain between our ears. We can make those assessments.
For sure.
Live, laugh, love, and all that.
Great. So to wrap up this episode, we're going to talk about the top 3 things that we can just, and it's not even in a hierarchy list.
Yeah,
It's
just what do you
whatever
do
comes
to
into
make
my head.
yourself feel better?
Yeah. So I would say sleep, be that for like 2 hours or 12 hours. I just love when you like wake up after a nap and you're just kind of there like, my body's so heavy, and like ideally there's like some sun coming through the window and you're just like, this is my like most primal state, I would say. Second is getting like a good takeaway. Can't fault it. I don't know what, I don't like consistently the same thing. I like all things in like a big jumble, and just eating that in bed, either after or like before asleep, whilst watching The Parent Trap. I try and watch that once a year. I try and save it for when I'm literally just there like, and then I put it in the DVD player, and it instantly, when that Nat King Cole comes in, gives me such joy.
You know, I don't think I've ever watched that the whole way through. Or if I have, it was like once. And it was probably with you.
I feel like we watched it. I feel like I had a similar reaction to you having never seen it. Oh, maybe not though.
We've done a few
I've
of
watched
those.
it with other people.
Like I hadn't. Rude.
Sorry.
We watched Grease together for the first time, and a couple of other things as well.
Okay, well, we can watch that. It's literally probably like, of like the kind of kiddie films, kids films. It's my favourite one, I would say. I love it so much.
Yay for baby Lindsay Lohan.
Yeah, and Natasha Richardson, R.I.P. She's the one that was married to, what's his name? That Irish guy who's in the Taken films. It's just
Liam Neeson.
Liam Neeson, but she hit her head in a skiing accident and then subsequently died.
Oh,
she's the one that like turns around and she goes like, "Look at me! Have you ever seen me like this?" And she's got like a long like cigarette and her glasses like this. And
Is
I'm like,
that
I love her.
in The Parent Trap?
Yeah, and you haven't seen it,
Yes.
but iconic scene for those who have seen it. Love her.
Yeah.
And she's in Wild Child. She's the headmistress. Anyway,
I have seen that.
cool.
I saw that in the cinema.
Amazing.
Great film.
Your turn.
It's just, well, no, you can just tell if I'm invested in a film if I actually bothered to see it in the cinema, because I find the cinema just a bit much sometimes. So my top three things are to find a new hobby. So something that I don't know anything about, and then just learn as much about it as I possibly can in a small period of time and make a lot of notes. As we were thinking about what questions to do, I went back through my journal that I've got here, and this year's I've done a lot. Done a lot of research. There's a whole bunch on Greek myths. There's a whole bunch on traditional Chinese medicine.
That's amazing.
There's a lot on astrology, as always. And then also just eating ice cream out of the tub
Can't fault it.
is just one of my favourite things. Whether I'm happy, whether I'm sad, it's just generally a good, comforting moment. If I just need to calm down, then that's...
I remember once, I know this is only supposed to be short, but it's worth saying, is when we were watching a sort of gig in a town next to us, and I was just really upset, and then I think we were both just feeling a bit like, oh. So then we went to the big Tesco and bought like a tub of Ben and Jerry's and just sat in bed, and I was like, this is perfect. So thank you for sharing that one with me.
Oh yeah, I remember that. That was a great time. That was Ben and Jerry's birthday cake flavoured ice cream.
And I've never had it since.
Have you not?
No, because I want to keep it in that.
I was eating ice cream out the tub in bed last night, and then someone started talking about eating placentas, and it was strawberry ice cream, and it had big old chunks of
fat. That was not... Ew, that's happened
heard
now.
that hit the
Yeah.
table.
That was me just like...
just
as
gobbling.
close to like being sick as I could.
Sorry.
It's all right.
No, it was just that they were talking about eating placentas, and there was like frozen bits of strawberry jam in it, and it just all looked a little bit too akin to it. So I didn't eat the whole tub, which I usually would. And then that's two things. And then third thing would be probably talk to my mum. I'm very lucky with my relationship with my mum, but mostly in the fact that we both have really weird senses of humour, and we will inevitably, one of us will make the other one giggle until we can't breathe.
That's lovely.
And yeah, big fan of that. Talk to someone that makes you laugh.
Yeah.
Not about what you're upset about, but about, I mean, unless you are like me or Bridie, which is where you deflect things about and use humour, and then you really can go in about whatever you're upset about and make it as ridiculous as you can until you start laughing.
Just hours. But that's good.
Yeah. So yeah,
Nice.
that's our top 6 tips.
Yeah.
Say that 10 times fast.
Toxic tips.
No, that's toxic tips.
What did I say?
You said-
Anyway,
You've been listening to us, Two Queers.
one pod. Oh, we switched it around. Amazing.
You can follow us on Instagram at 2queers1pod, and now we have Patreon.
Yes, so all the bonus content on there if you want to get involved.
If you want to see our faces doing these,
yeah. So
recordings.
this one and potentially the one before, we've got video versions of this podcast available if you would like to watch us as we speak, exclusively on Patreon.
For our £3 tier and above.
So yeah, be sure to rate, review and subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Acast, or wherever you prefer to do your
listenage.
Amazing. Yeah, so thank you for listening to another episode and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye. This podcast was produced by Harry Williams.
Chanel.